The first fairy horn of the summer reached me through the open cafe window. The sound rolled across the harbor, deep and steady, and for a moment I stopped wiping the glass just to listen. The sea was calm enough that I could see the ferry pushing through a pale line of foam, its shape growing larger as it approached the pier. When the ferry comes in, the whole island feels awake again. The air changes. It carries the smell of salt and new stories. Cats stretch on the seawall, and the boats creak against their ropes as if they're greeting someone they know. I live on Mizuhama Island. It isn't large, one school, a few shrines, and a coast that changes color every hour. My family runs a small place called the Tide Glass Cafe. We open before sunrise because fishermen like their first cup of coffee before the nets are dry. My mother says, "If you're awake, you might as well be useful." I try to live by that rule, though sometimes being still feels useful too. That morning, the cafe smelled like coffee grounds and lemons. I was wiping the last table when the bell over the door rang. I looked up and saw a boy duck through the doorway, a duffel bag on his shoulder. His hair was longer than I remembered, his skin a little pale, like someone who hadn't seen the sea in years. "Welcome," I said out of habit, then stopped. "Ren?" He looked at me for a second before his face broke into a surprised smile. "Ray?" It had been 5 years since the last time I saw him, back when he used to visit his uncle for the summer. He'd been quiet then, smaller, always running from one end of the pier to the other, with sandals that slapped against the boards. Now he looked older, but his eyes were the same gray-blue I remembered from the tide pools. "I didn't think you'd recognize me," he said. "People don't change that much," I said. "They just stand differently." He laughed softly. "You look exactly the same." "Everyone says that," I told him. "It's island law." He set his bag by the counter and leaned on it like he was testing if the floor would hold him. "I'm back for the summer. Uncle Satoru needed help with the boats." "You'll smell like fish all season," I said. "That's your warning." "I'll take it." I poured him a glass of iced lemonade and slid it across the counter. He didn't ask for it. "Here, newcomers get lemonade first. It's how we welcome them." He took a sip and relaxed a little. "Still good," he said. "Of course it is." Outside, the sunlight bounced off the water. The harbor shimmered like it had been polished overnight. Ren followed my gaze and smiled. "The place feels smaller," he said. "That's what happens when you grow," I said. "The island doesn't shrink. You just see more of it." He nodded slowly. "That sounds like something you'd say." "It's the same thing I would have said 5 years ago," I told him. "Some habits don't leave." He finished the drink and set the glass down carefully. "Thanks. I'll see you around." "You will," I said. "West Cove tomorrow morning, 7. Bring a towel. We'll see if you still swim like a rock." His smile widened. "Deal." When he left, the cafe felt different. Quieter, but not in a bad way. The sound of the sea filled the space he'd left, and I realized I'd been waiting for something new, without knowing it. The afternoon passed in its usual rhythm. Fishermen came for their coffee, children came for melon soda, and the old man from the bookstore came for cake and conversation. The sunlight turned gold on the counter. By the time we closed, my hands smelled like lemon and soap, and the cicadas outside were singing like they'd just discovered sound. Grandmother Aya stopped by on her evening walk. She's small and bright-eyed, the kind of old woman who makes you believe the island listens to her. "He's back," she said before I could even say hello. "Who?" She raised an eyebrow. "You know who. That boy who used to chase you with buckets of crabs." "Ren," I admitted. Aya smiled. "The sea always brings people back when there's something they forgot to say. I thought it just brings them back when the ferry's on time." "That too," she said, and laughed. "But the tide doesn't waste energy on accidents." She sat for a while and told me one of her stories. Every time she tells it, the details change a little, but the heart of it stays the same. There's a legend that the sea here keeps the small tides safe. The gentle ones, not the storms. It remembers the wishes people make when they stand at the edge of the water and actually mean them. Aya says that's why our festival sends lanterns out to sea every year, to thank it for remembering us. When she left, the sky was deep blue and the first stars were out. I cleaned the last cup, locked the door, and walked home through the quiet streets. My mother was already asleep. I sat by the window with my notebook and wrote one sentence. He's back, and the island feels awake. The next morning, the cove was pale and still. I was there early, as always, when the world was quiet enough to hear my own heartbeat. The sand was cool, the waves small and even. I waded in until the water touched my knees, then dove forward. The salt stung my skin in a way that made me feel alive. When I came up for air, Ren was standing on the path that led down to the shore, shoes in hand. He waved, awkward but sincere. "You came," I said. I said I would. "That doesn't always mean much," I teased. He grinned. "Guess I'm an exception." We started with the basics. "Breathe with the sea, not against it," I said. "If you fight, you'll lose. If you listen, it'll hold you up." He tried. He tensed, swallowed water, laughed, and tried again. By the third attempt, he could float for a few seconds without panicking. "I'm not drowning," he said proudly. "That's the goal," I said. "You're doing fine." We stayed until the sun was bright enough to turn the sand hot underfoot. Then we sat in the shade and shared the rice balls I'd packed. The sea whispered in the background, steady and endless. He looked out toward the horizon. "I forgot how quiet it is here," he said. "It's not quiet," I said. "You just stopped hearing this kind of noise." He smiled, thoughtful. "Maybe that's why I came back." I watched the way the sunlight caught his hair. "Why did you?" "The city felt too loud even when it wasn't," he said. "I wanted a place where I could think without fighting for space to breathe." "That's a good reason," I said. "The island's good at helping people remember who they are." He turned his head toward me. "And you? Why do you stay?" I shrugged. "Because I don't know what it would feel like to leave." He nodded slowly. "That's reason enough." We ate the rest of lunch in silence, but it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind that lets you feel the wind on your skin and the warmth of someone sitting beside you. That evening, he came by the cafe. I was wiping the counter again, though it didn't need it. He took the seat nearest the window. "You're not busy?" he asked. "Not anymore," I said. "The fisherman went home. The cats are my only customers now," he smiled. "Mind if I keep them company?" "Go ahead. They don't tip." We talked about small things, the flavor of the lemonade, the old vending machine that ate coins and sometimes returned them, how Aya always seemed to appear where she was needed most. It felt easy, the way talking should when you stop worrying about what comes next. When he left that night, the street was quiet, and I stood by the door long after the bell had stopped ringing. I wrote in my notebook, "He's learning to float." Maybe I am too. Summer started to stretch out in long, soft days. The sun rose early and the air stayed warm even after sunset. Ren came to the cafe most mornings after working with his uncle. His hands smelled like salt and rope, and there were faint marks on his wrists from hauling nets. He always ordered lemonade, and I pretended not to notice that he liked it best when it was too sour. He was different from the boy I remembered. Quieter, but easier with silence. He didn't talk about the city much, and I didn't ask. Some things are better left to fade until they come back on their own. Aya visited almost every afternoon. She liked to sit near the window and tell stories about the sea, and Ren always listened as if he'd never heard anything like them before. She told him that the island's tides are alive, that they hold memories of everyone who ever stood on the shore with a wish in their heart. Ren smiled politely, but I could tell he wanted to believe her. One evening, when we closed up, he waited by the door with a shy grin. "Want to walk a bit?" he asked. The air outside was cooling, the street still holding the warmth of the day. "Where to?" "Nowhere in particular," he said. "That's the point." We walked down toward the pier. The light was fading fast, and the sea reflected the last bits of gold. We didn't say much at first. Our footsteps matched without trying. A few fishing boats were returning, their small engines coughing in the distance. The smell of grilled corn drifted from somewhere inland. Ren leaned on the railing and watched the horizon. "When I was a kid," he said, "I thought the ocean ended somewhere just beyond the lighthouse. Like it hit a wall and stopped." "Did you think you'd fall off?" I asked. He laughed quietly. "Maybe. Or maybe I thought that's where all the lost things went. Like keys and socks and time." "Still a poet," I said. "Only by accident." He turned to me, his expression softer. "Do you like it here, Ray?" "I do," I said. "But liking something and belonging to it aren't always the same." He nodded, as if he understood exactly what I meant. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes home is the place that waits for you, even when you don't belong to it anymore." We stayed until the stars came out, the air smelling faintly of salt and rain. When we finally headed back, the ferry horn sounded across the water, one long note that seemed to stretch all the way into the dark. The next few weeks moved in slow rhythm. Work, swim, rest. The island life doesn't need much more. Sometimes we met at the cove and swam until our arms were too tired to lift. Other days, he helped me carry boxes at the cafe, or we sat on the steps eating watermelon, spitting seeds into the street, and pretending to count who threw them farther. It felt easy. Too easy, maybe. One afternoon, the wind picked up and clouds rolled in fast. The sea turned rough, darker. Everyone knew a storm was coming before the forecast did. I was wiping tables when Ren appeared at the door, already damp from the first drops. "Your mom told me to walk you home," he said. I laughed. "I live 2 streets away." She said, and I quote, "Don't argue with common sense." We left together as the rain started to fall harder, thin drops that turned quickly into sheets. We ran the last stretch to the shop awning at the corner, half soaked, half laughing. The world smelled like wet salt and earth. Rain drummed on the metal roof above us. I brushed the water from my hair and caught him watching me. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "Just, you look like you belong here, like part of the rain." I wasn't sure what to do with that, so I said, "That's a weird thing to say." He laughed, embarrassed, but didn't take it back. When the rain eased, we stepped out again. The streets were shining with reflections of lanterns from windows, each one trembling with the water that still dripped from the eaves. We stopped by the bridge that crossed the narrow channel leading out to the sea. Water flowed under us, dark and restless. Ren leaned on the railing and said quietly, "Do you think people remember each other forever?" "Maybe not forever," I said. "But I think people stay where they mattered, even if it's just a little." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess that's enough." The festival came near the end of August, when the days were still bright, but you could feel the season starting to lean toward its end. Paper lanterns hung from the eaves of every shop. The air smelled like grilled squid, sweet syrup, and the sea. Children ran around in yukata, waving sparklers like tiny swords. I wore my grandmother's blue yukata, the one with little white shells stitched along the hem. My mother pinned my hair up, then stood back and said, "You look like summer." Ren met me near the shrine. He wore a light shirt, hair slightly messy from the wind. He smiled when he saw me but didn't say anything for a moment. "What?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. "You just look like someone the sea would listen to." I rolled my eyes, but it warmed me anyway. We walked together along the main street, carrying lanterns for the cafe's stall. The whole island seemed to be there. Aya was telling stories again, surrounded by children. She looked up as we passed and called out, "Don't forget to make a wish, Ray." "I won't," I answered, and she grinned like she already knew what it would be. As night came fully, People gathered by the shore. Dozens of small paper lanterns floated on the water, each one carrying a tiny flame that flickered with the wind. They drifted slowly toward the open sea, golden paths stretching into darkness. Ren stood beside me. "There's a legend, right?" "Yeah," I said. "If you make a wish when the last lantern passes under the bridge, the sea will remember it for you." He smiled. "What are you going to wish for?" I thought about it carefully. The sound of waves, the hum of people talking, the faint hiss of the torches all seemed to pause. "To remember this summer exactly as it is," I said. "No more, no less. That's a good one. What about you?" I asked. He looked down at the water. "Maybe the same thing." The last lantern drifted under the bridge, and the first firework burst overhead. White light spilling over the sea, mirrored in the waves. The sound rolled through my chest. More followed, each color brighter than the last. The crowd cheered, and the air filled with smoke and laughter. I felt Ren's hand brush mine. Then he took it, slow and certain. Neither of us looked at each other. We just watched the sky, our hands linked, while the fireworks burned and faded. When it was over, we walked back through the narrow streets. The noise faded behind us, replaced by the quiet chorus of cicadas and the sound of our footsteps on wet pavement. At the corner where our paths split, we stopped. He looked at me, the glow from the paper lanterns touching his face. "I like you," he said simply. I could feel the words in my throat before they left my mouth. "I like you too," I said. "But," he nodded, "but summer ends." Yes. For a moment we just stood there, the night full of small sounds, the wind, the sea, the last distant echo of fireworks. Then he smiled a little, not sad, just quiet. "We don't have to promise anything," he said. "Let's just remember it right." I smiled back. "Okay." He squeezed my hand once, then let go and turned toward the harbor. I watched him go until he disappeared behind the streetlights, and then I walked home, the echo of the fireworks still warm in my chest. That night, I wrote in my notebook. I told the truth, and the world kept breathing. The festival passed, but summer didn't slow down. The days after felt softer, like the world was catching its breath. The sky stayed blue, but the light had changed. Warmer, lower, almost tired. Ren still came by the cafe every morning. He helped my mother carry crates and fixed a shelf that had been loose for years. We didn't talk about what we'd said that night. We didn't have to. Everything between us felt quieter, but it wasn't distance. It was something we both respected. Aya visited one afternoon while I was sweeping the front steps. "You've been smiling differently," she said. "Is that good?" I asked. "It means you've been living," she said. "That's always good, even when it hurts later." Her words stayed with me. In the second week of August, Ren told me he would be leaving soon. He said it simply, without build-up, while we were sitting by the pier eating shaved ice that melted faster than we could finish it. "Uncle says the work slows down after Obon," he said. "So I'll head back to the city." "Already?" "Yeah. My mom wants me home before school starts again." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "That makes sense." We both looked out at the sea. A fishing boat was coming in, nets heavy with the day's catch. The gulls followed, noisy and fearless. "I'll miss this," he said. "The sea?" "All of it," he said. "But mostly how it feels to not rush anywhere." I wanted to say, then stay, but I didn't. Sometimes keeping quiet is the kindest thing you can do. "Come back next year," I said instead. "I will," he said. But his voice made it sound like a wish, not a plan. The day before he left, the island was so still, it felt like the air was holding its breath. I finished my chores early and walked to the cove. The sand was warm, and the tide was pulling out. Ren was already there, sitting on a rock, his shoes beside him. "I figured you'd come," he said. "I always do," I said. We sat side by side, not touching, just watching the water. The waves were small, almost shy, like they didn't want to interrupt. I got into a school on the mainland, I said quietly. I start in September. He turned his head, surprised. Really? I nodded. It's not far, just across the bay. But still, off the island. That's amazing, he said, smiling. You'll be great. I'm nervous. That's how you know it matters, he said. The wind picked up, tugging at my hair. I let it blow across my face so he wouldn't see the small tremor in my mouth. You know, he said after a moment. Maybe it's better this way. We both get to keep this summer exactly how it is. No promises, just something good we'll always have. I looked at him, at the way the sunlight hit his face. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said. But it's right. I nodded, even though my throat felt tight. We stayed until the sun started to drop behind the hills, until the water turned gold and the sky shifted to that slow, endless color that looks like goodbye. The next morning, I walked to the pier with him. The ferry was already there, its engine humming low. People were boarding, carrying small bags and waving at the crew. Ren turned to me. So this is it. I smiled as best I could. For now. He hesitated, then reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His hand lingered for a heartbeat. You'll write? I'll try, I said. But I don't promise anything. Good, he said. Neither do I. We both laughed, a little shaky, but it helped. When the ferry horn sounded, he picked up his bag and stepped onto the ramp. I stood there, watching as the distance grew. He looked back once, just once, and lifted his hand in a small wave. I waved too. Then the ferry pulled away. The water churned white, then settled. The noise faded until all that was left was the sea, calm and endless. I stayed on the pier until the ferry was a dot against the horizon. Then I turned and walked home slowly, counting each step like I was trying to memorize the sound of them. A few weeks later, I packed my own bag. The first time I took the train from the mainland station, I sat by the window and watched the coastline slip away. The city looked bigger than I remembered. Its noise wasn't angry, just full. I tried to listen for the sea underneath it, but it was too far. At night, I missed the rhythm of waves outside my window, the sound of nets being dragged across wooden decks, the faint chime of the cafe bell when someone came in. My mother called often. Aya wrote me a postcard that said, "The sea remembers you even when you don't hear it." Sometimes, when the streets were too bright and the air too heavy, I'd close my eyes and picture the cove, the color of the water, and Ren's laugh echoing across it. That was enough to steady me. When autumn came, I returned to the island for a weekend. The air was cooler, the hills tinged with green and gold. The cafe looked the same. My mother greeted me with a tired smile and a bowl of miso soup that tasted like home. I walked down to the shore in the evening. The tide was low, and the rocks glistened under the fading light. I sat where Ren and I used to sit and watched the sea pull itself back, slow and steady. There was a small shell half buried in the sand. White, spiral, perfect. I picked it up and turned it in my hand. For a moment, I thought I could hear Aya's voice, faint and far away. The sea keeps the small tides safe. I closed my eyes. The wind brushed against me, carrying the scent of salt and lemons from the cafe. Thank you, I whispered, for that summer. The waves came in gently, touching my feet, as if the sea was saying, I remember. It's been a year since then. Sometimes, when I'm back on the island, I hear the ferry horn and still look up, half expecting to see him stepping off with his duffel bag, smiling like he never left. Maybe he will one day, maybe not. Either way, I think we did it right. Some summers aren't meant to last. They're meant to stay, quietly, like the sound of waves in the back of your mind. And that was the summer I learned what it means to love someone just enough to let them go, and how to keep a season in your heart without trying to hold it still. Because the sea remembers. And maybe, so do I.